Do you ever wonder how you can be a better supervisor? Well, thanks for showing up. This is a space you'll get some tips and strategies. My name is Dr. Courtney Pegram, and I am the host of The Ordinary Professor. I create videos, snippets, resources to help you with social skills, leadership, management, and all things feelings. Okay, so today I want to focus on supervision skills, like the basics. So let's go back to basic. Now, there's a few things that you need to do in order to work on supervision skills. First, you have to understand the difference between leadership and supervision. So supervision is more transactional, and it's daily operations. It's about expectations, priorities, timelines, feedback, efficiency, and effectiveness. Where leadership is about vision. It's about building your people, growth, coaching, mentoring, guiding, aligning, strategy, right? So, and why they can both be together, right? You can be a great leader and manager, or you can be a horrible leader and a great manager, or vice versa. Now, the goal is to understand the different definitions so that when you're thinking, hey, where I need to develop, oftentimes I meet amazing leaders, but they've been in a leadership role for so long that they haven't really spent the time in daily supervision. And I have some supervisors that are moving up the ranks and now need some leadership training. So it's all different types of training, and it's not a one size fits all. Now let's talk about supervision. So I'm going back to the basics. When it comes to supervision, you have to think about what are the key components of skills needed. Organization, right? Time management, prioritization, setting clear expectations, communication, taking conceptual ideas or things that are conceptual and making them doable. Here's the thing, here's the vision, the strategy, make it happen. Okay. It's also about planning and understanding how to communicate the plan to get results. So think about efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, you're a new supervisor, you don't know what to do. So here's some ideas. First, setting the tone and creating clear expectations at a team level and at an individual level. Meaning that your team knows exactly how they have to operate, what is required of them, what is their roles as a team. And then individually, clear expectation of their roles, expectations, what they need to do, how you want that delivered, and then how you want to be communicated. So it's really important to think about that because there's a lot of things I'm seeing with my clients, and also because I'm a professor too, I see with my students is people don't know where to communicate. Is it the chat? Is it is it text message? Is it on email? Is it over the phone? And so supervisors get upset. They're this could have been a phone call. Well, if you've never set the tone that this should have been a phone call, it's definitely going to be an email. Because nowadays people like to hey, I don't really want to, especially if you're a manager that's a little emotionally deregulated, you're going to get a lot of emails. Why? Because people don't want to pick up the phone because maybe it's hard to talk to you. So self-reflection is key on your supervision skills. So that's why when you set expectations, it's setting, right, the space so everyone's on the same page. So they know exactly how to show up, what to do, right? So examples of expectations could be I expect that if you're starting at 8 o'clock, you should be at your desk working, versus I expect that if I need a report that's due for a meeting on Monday, I get the draft by Friday. I expect that a draft, newsletter is that it's at the final place where there's barely any changes. So those are expectations. Now, why is it important to be clear about this? Because you have to figure out who you're working with. Now, it could be a seasoned employee that's you would explain that a little different, those expectations, because you don't want to be dismissive or talk down to someone. But someone that's green, that's right out of college, they need that clarity, right? Because I remember right out of college, I didn't know how to send an email. What's an agenda, right? So we're setting the precedent of not training employees on executive functioning skills and assuming that they learn them in school. Well, good news, I teach them in my school, but I'm one school, one professor. And I know a lot of professors are starting to implement that, but we need to do more of that because students aren't career ready and employers don't have time necessarily to teach these skills, which I think it's give or take that there should be more training on that in the workplace, and at school we should be really teaching our students to be career ready. So that's a debate for another time, not a Friday afternoon in my kitchen. So what you want to do is create clear expectations. Now, for my, let's call them overdoers, having 30 expectations is way too much, right? Try to create buckets, right? So that it's here's the expectations for communication, maybe our operations. Maybe here's some expectations for our SOPs, SOP being standard operating procedures, right? Those things are so hard to write out sometimes, and they're so complicated. But if you have expectations on them and a way to train, it's beautiful. Okay, now after you have your expectations, you need to have a meeting and explain this to your employees. You can't just roll something out with a document. If you're like, why? Because people don't read. Honestly, like I get 150 emails a day. So I skim, I read, and I'll come back to it. But some of the long emails that have a long attachment and then it's a 30-page document of expectations, I will skim or I'll not look over it. But if I'm going to have a meeting and you're going to train me on it, I'm going to make sure I'm prepared for that meeting because I want to manage up. Okay? So when you're communicating something new, you have to do it in different channels consistently. So it could be like, here's an email stating our new expectations. On Monday morning, we'll have a meeting about it. And then 2 weeks later, we'll follow up with a Zoom session to make sure we're all clear. Okay, that's the setup. Now, how do you keep implementing your expectations? Okay, great question. You want to make sure that you call people out when things aren't being followed. You have to do the calling out. I know I don't specifically, I'm a great teacher. I managed for years. I managed over my career about 175 people. Was I great at it? It's debatable. I made a lot of mistakes, which makes me really great at teacher. Because I was like, well, I told them they needed to do the thing, right? So I'm like, I'll just do the thing. I don't want to bother them, right? But I didn't hold them accountable to the expectations that we set. So here's a tip. If they're not following through, we can always ask them, hey, Bill, I asked you about that report. And when we talked about expectations, we all want to see it on Friday. I know you missed it this week. Can you make sure that this Friday you get it? That's a way. You don't have to use all the jargon like circling back or per our last email, right? Just have a human conversation, okay? So if I was going to talk to Bill, I'd pick up the phone. Hey, Bill, just want to take a minute of your time. I need that report to become on Friday and explain your why. So when we're trying to keep people accountable, assuming they know the why is not a good thing. Most of the time, people don't. So explain the why. Okay. So once you set the expectations, repeating the expectations as frequently as you can, posting them somewhere, and then calling people out immediately is important. Now, what I like to do once I set expectations in a workplace or in my classrooms is I like to have a social contract or rules of engagement. Now, that is separate. So in a company, I did a culture reset. We created rules of engagement, a social contract of how we're going to operate because they were great at doing tasks, but sometimes the inner communication, they struggled. So they developed their own social contract. To do that, you need to have, depending on the size of the company, maybe an open forum, right, where you have all employees share some things that they'd like. And I like to bucket items. So as a facilitator, I can figure out where these rules of engagement, these items need to go in the social contract. So for example, let's take the last social contract I did. So the first item we talked about was, okay, how do we train our employees? What are some things for the social contract so I make sure that people are trained, that they're in compliance? What are some things we need? And the second one was, how do we communicate? What channels do we use? What are we using so that everyone's on the same page? And the third one's come up with something fun. I always like the fun part, right? We need to have more fun at work. We spend so much time at work. And sometimes it doesn't cost the manager or the supervisor anything. It's something super easy, but you never asked your employees. And it creates incentive, right? So for people to be more engaged. So then at that open forum, you gather all the data depending on your size. Then you vote on it. So as a supervisor, you have the final say, but you have the employees vote because maybe it's only one person that wants that. So when it goes to a vote, no one is agreeing, and then you can just veto it and say, okay. Lastly, after everyone votes and you figure out what works, then you say, okay, accepted, or we need to redo this. And then those items that were voted on and you approve, that's your social contract. Those are the rules of engagement that your department, your team, your organization will follow. And so it has to be a mix of accountability, of performance, and fun so that it becomes a social contract, right? So often in my social contract, that's where I talk about hey, how do you want to be held accountable? How do I call you out on things that you didn't do your job? How do I tell you didn't do your job so that I don't feel like I'm, scolding you, but also you're impacting efficiency and effectiveness. So you need to be told, right? That really helps set the tone. So those are the ways I'm setting some expectations. Okay, so now let's move on to Second thing, you need to align priorities, especially if you have a big team. Say you have a team of 10, their priorities are going to be all over the place. And if you have different levels of knowledge, that also has different priorities. Because if I'm a seasoned employee, I might be really good and fast at writing reports and you don't even have to check my work. But I don't know, Amy, she's new. She doesn't have like the time or understanding of writing a report. I'm constantly revising it. It's taking me so much time, right? I'm really frustrated with Amy. She should know this, okay? That's another thing as a supervisor. You take the should out of your vocabulary. Do not assume or do not should people. Because the problem is you're making assumptions. Oftentimes, employees are afraid to ask what they don't know because they don't know what they don't know, and it gets everyone in a big pickle. So to avoid the pickles in the workplace, don't should people. And avoid at all costs when you're trying to prioritize fanning. This is another term I love. I love it. Okay? Forever, always, never. When you start fanning as a supervisor, it's really hard to get your employees to set priorities. Because if you're like, you're always doing this wrong, or we never can get this on time. Now, that's like really negative tone to like help your employees set priorities. So use different languages. Avoid the shoulds and the fanning. Now, when you're looking at the priorities, I always like to look at organizational alignment. So start with the organization. Hey, what does your boss want? What does your boss want? What do you want? And how do you get your employees to be aligned with that? So when you kind of explain that system to your employees, they might be more likely to understand, oh, when I'm filing these things, it's not just to file things and check a box. It has a bigger impact. And this is how it helps the CEO. It creates alignment. Now next, ask your employees at least once a week to maybe Monday morning, give them 15 minutes to organize their time. Hey, can you organize your time, your week, and prioritize and send me a list of your priorities? Then decide how you want them to send it to you. And always be consistent so that not one week it's on email, the next week's on text messages, then it's a chat, then it's a voice memo, right? That is confusing. You, as a supervisor, need to have structure, repetition, and consistency. So create these systems for yourself. So for me, priorities, I would prefer on Friday, an employee using a template sends me, hey, quick, I love bullet points of what I did, what's not done and why, and what I need from you, and my priorities for next week. Okay, why does that help? Because at a manager at the end of Friday, I can look through them, scan because they're bullet points, and be like, yeah, no, yeah. And then I might respond via email and say, great, shift this to that, do this or that, and then boom. So Monday morning when they arrive, they have your feedback on what they're supposed to be working on. And if they have follow-up questions, make sure you have an early stand-up meeting in the beginning of the week so they're set up for success, okay? So that defines like the priorities. Then you're kind of working through timelines, but also that creates that follow-up. Okay, so once you define your priorities, you explain the why on the priorities, you need to create timelines. Here's a trick I love telling my clients. When do you need that proposal by? When is this due? And then I backtrack and try to make it a little ahead of time in case there's snafus. There's always snafus. There's always things that happen, right? So defining timelines is critical. Due dates need to be respected and people need to hold them accountable. Now, I say that. Am I always great at it? No. I mean, as a professor, oh my God, I have a big, big heart. It's full of love for my students. And sometimes I get it. It's an assignment. It's like a case study. Like, Dr. Pegram, can I have an extension? Oh my God, something happened. And I know their lives happen. I know how busy and how stressed out they are. And they're the anxious generation. So I'm not going to be like, yeah, you just lost 100 points. Good luck. This is real life, kid. It's not. Also, just so you know, I am not teaching accounting classes where the major issues can happen if they don't make their deadlines. I teach the initial class. So I'm like the softer manager. Now, so think about me as a softer manager. So I give them their grace. However, in my expectations and my social contract, it says you get one pass, right? Next time you get 0. So they're clear. So that one pass, when they come to me, I messed up, I'll be okay, thanks for telling me, that's your pass, okay? So it's not like I'm lenient on all things, but we set the expectations, and then in the social contract, we reiterated it. So when they come to me about missing deadlines, they are held accountable. It is beautiful, okay? So you see how all these things are falling into part. Okay, when you're defining deadlines, my biggest trick, and also I kind of laugh because my clients are like, they should have known we changed the deadline. I'm like, how would they have known? Well, it was in the memo that was sent. I'm like, Okay, but you have to kind of follow up and remind them because they might be thinking about something else or it doesn't apply to them or they were CC'd on an email. Like we have to be like more consistent and clear about our communication so it trickles down. Why? Because our workplaces are no longer like, hey, let me stop at your cube or your office and say hi. It's remote, hybrid, it's mixed. So you have to be really clear when timelines change that everyone knows. So create a space where that channel is communicated. So maybe you say, hey, on Teams, anytime a deadline is changed, there's a channel, it says timeline change, and you just throw it in there, right? Or you have one way of doing it, it's always the same way. Because you're gonna see that some timelines shift a lot and some are just no-brainers, they don't move. That really creates that structure for you to be able to communicate that. Now, next, those check-ins. I know. I mean, I do executive coaching. My clients are like, do I have to do like check-ins every week? Why? Because employees want to hear from you. Now, your check-ins don't have to be 2 hours, 1 hour. They can be 50. It can be a stand-up, but you need to check in with the people you work with. They might have questions, concerns, things are going on. You need to know what's going on with your people because they are your resource, right? You need to see if they're on track. So if you do check-ins via Zoom, in person, right? But make sure you're checking in with them and that you're showing up to the meeting. You're not constantly canceling it. I had a client that was like, when things get busy, I just cancel the meeting. I'm like, so the employees are just running around not knowing what's going on, right? And just doing their work. And then the feedback was so bad because my client was so upset with their deliverables, but they weren't meeting weekly. You have to meet. Supervisors have to meet with their employees once a week. I would recommend at least 15 minutes. You have to do 15 minutes. A good time frame is 30 minutes to 45, right? So if you have the time and you don't have 30 employees, you can definitely do an hour. And then if it takes less, you get more time back to yourself. Now, make sure that those meetings are structured. So it's not just a venting period for your employees to complain. It's not just a chit chat conversation. That at the end of the meeting, there's deliverables, there's results, right? So again, efficiency and effectiveness are coming into play. So in your regular check-ins, create an agenda and then assign the employee to fill in the agenda with the items they want to discuss. Even if they're like, oh, I don't have to check in with you. Okay, let's make it 5 minutes. Just tell me what you're working on. I need to update you on some things. Because sometimes as a supervisor, you might get updates especially if you're in middle management. You're getting stuff from your supervisors, your managers, and you need to relay it back down. And in the moment, it's like, okay, I'll do that later. And then if your check-in gets canceled, you forget to do it. You've got so much on your mind. So the regular check-ins keeps that structure for your brain and also the consistency for your employees. Something I like to do, in my check-ins is have feedback. The last 10 minutes. And I'm actually stealing that from an old client. So if Jack ever listens, this is Jack's feedback. He was a great client. He would do at his end of his check-ins weekly, 10 minutes of feedback. So the employee would give feedback to him, and then he would give feedback to the employee. I liked his model, but he was very direct and to the point. So even as I say that, my body reacts because I would have not done well with Jack as far as an employee. So you've got to figure out how your employees, why? Because Jack was so direct sometimes, and the way he would deliver information was a little harsh. So I can imagine if I was early in my career, I would have been taken aback. But if I was used to Jack and I knew that was coming, then I could adjust. So if you're going to use Jack's method, the 10-minute, make sure that your employee is 100% clear and say maybe if they're introverted or need time to process or more sensitive employees, that you send them, hey, on the feedback session, I want to discuss these things. Or you can use this model. Start, stop, continue. So you can say to your employee, okay, we're going to go through the start, stop, continue. I want you to run me through what went well this week. So the things you started doing that are successes. Stuff that you want to continue doing is working really well, and stuff that you want to stop, you've got some feedback that didn't work for you. So the employee is actually giving you feedback about themselves, so they learn how to do that and not just show you all the good or talk how bad they are, because we have employees across the spectrum. Employees that are braggalicious, they do nothing wrong, and employees that do everything right but can't feel like they can get anything right. So the ones that really struggle with self-worth and self-esteem, right, and self-sabotage. So they all work in the same place, okay? See? Supervision is hard. So you've got to figure out how that feedback works. So the start, stop, continues has the employee first reflect on themselves and be ready. And then you say, okay, so I like what you said. I'd like to add a few items. So in your start, I think I would like to see you starting work just maybe 5 minutes earlier, because when you show up at the meeting and you're rushing in at the last minute, it gives you the appearance that you're flustered and unprepared. And I know you're not. So I think an idea would be maybe showing up just 5 minutes early on those days. It's a great way to give feedback. Now for the continue, be like, I love what you're doing. And there's another thing I noticed what you're doing. This is great. This, I would love, right, for you to do this continuously because you're doing a great job. You're actually giving them recognition, right, in the continue, and you're acknowledging for the work they're doing. And then the stop, right? Hey, so I noticed that there's been some errors in the reports you're writing. So I'd like you to spend and stop and slow down and reread your stuff. Like we have tools, Grammarly, whatever, like if you need a colleague to look it over. Because sometimes like as I'm skimming it, I'm not looking for grammar. And if it goes to our boss, it looks really bad. So it looks bad because it looks like we're not aligned. And it is my responsibility to make sure it's correct. But I want that final draft before I'm looking at it to be like almost 100%. That's another way of giving feedback. So that's using the start, stop, continue model. Okay. Now, I want to kind of elaborate lastly on recognition. Okay. So there's an old school mentality. I am 100% like upbringing of that. No news is good news. Okay. That is the worst thing because you live in a workplace of fear. Okay. So no news is good news is you think you're doing great, right? And then all of a sudden your boss is like, hey, can we meet? And you're like, we got to meet. What's happening? What did I do wrong? Okay. Let me look at everything. How do I prepare? Oh, and you're coming in with the worst case scenario. Okay. So years ago that might have worked. It's not anymore. We have 5 different generations in the workplace and we need to start recognizing each other. And you know what? Being the upbringing of the no news, good news, when I started to kind of get more recognition, I loved it. I loved it, right? So giving more recognition consistently to your employees is perfect. So that's the way that we really consistently can increase performance with our employees is when we recognize them for the hard work they put in and not just giving them feedback like criticizing everything they do, because then we're breaking down their worth. And we can go that in another total tutorial about this, but it's really important to give consistent recognition to your employees. I hope these tips are helpful for supervision, and I look forward to hearing your feedback and let me know what you want to learn more about. Thanks for joining.